The restaurant had the kind of lighting that made everything feel softer than it really was. Warm bulbs, low ceilings, the illusion of privacy, even though every table was close enough to hear fragments of other people's conversations. I was seated near the back, across from a woman I'd never met until a few weeks earlier, yet somehow knew better than most people in my life. Her name was Claire. She was studying the menu without really reading it, eyes drifting back to the same page over and over. I watched her do it for a moment before speaking. "You can order whatever you want," I said. "This place is decent. Overpriced, but decent." She smiled faintly. "I don't think I'm going to taste anything anyway." A server came by, asked for our orders. She chose pasta and a glass of wine. I asked for grilled fish and water. When the server left, there was a brief silence. Not awkward, just heavy. "So," she said finally, folding the menu closed, "your lawyer thinks this will stay quiet?" "As quiet as these things ever get," I replied. "No kids, no shared property. Most of it's already documented." She nodded slowly. "That helps." Outside the window behind her, headlights slid past in streaks of white and red. Normal traffic, normal night. Nothing about the world looked like it was about to shift. "I still don't understand how you stayed calm," she said. "If I'd seen what you saw, I would have lost it." I didn't answer right away. The truth was, I didn't stay calm because I was strong. I stayed calm because something inside me shut off the moment I understood what was happening. Anger came later. Planning came first. "I didn't want explanations," I said. "I wanted clarity." That part was true. 3 weeks earlier, I hadn't been sitting in a restaurant preparing for a public confrontation. I'd been in my own apartment, barefoot on the hardwood floor, holding a mug of coffee that had gone cold while I stared at my wife's laptop. She hadn't tried to hide anything. That was the strange part. The screen was still glowing when I walked past the dining table that morning. A messaging window opened. A name I didn't recognize. Words that didn't belong to a married woman. Not flirting, not hints. Plans. I remember reading the same sentence twice, then a third time, because my brain refused to accept it on the first pass. When it finally did, something settled in my chest. Not pain, not rage. Resolve. I closed the laptop exactly how I'd found it. When my wife came out of the bedroom a few minutes later, dressed for work, she kissed me on the cheek and asked if I wanted anything from the cafe downstairs. I said no. That day, instead of confronting her, I called a lawyer. 2 days later, I knew the man's full name. A week after that, I knew he was married. And 10 days after that, I was sitting across from his wife, comparing timelines like two people reviewing the same crime from different angles. Claire's food arrived. She took a few bites, then pushed the plate slightly away. "He still thinks he can talk his way out of it," she said. "That if he denies long enough, I'll doubt myself." I nodded. "They always do." "You sure she's coming?" she asked. I glanced at my phone, face down on the table. "She will," I said. "She thinks she's catching me." That finally got a real smile from her. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. We talked quietly while the restaurant filled up. About logistics, about boundaries, about what we would and wouldn't say once things started moving. At one point, she leaned back slightly and said, "You know, most people would have chosen a fight at home. Screaming, accusations. That gives them room to lie," I said. "I don't want that." She studied me for a second, then nodded. "I'm glad you reached out," she said. "Even if this ends badly, at least it ends honestly." A vibration buzzed against the tabletop. This time, I didn't ignore it. I checked the screen, then set the phone back down between us. "She's 5 minutes away," I said. Claire took a slow sip of wine. "Good." I looked around the restaurant one more time. The couples, the families, the conversations that had nothing to do with what was about to happen. For everyone else, it was just another night out. For us, it was the end of pretending. The dinner wasn't where things began. It was just where everything I'd been holding back finally had a place to land. Weeks earlier, my life had still felt normal, predictable, boring, even, in a way I'd learned to appreciate. We had routines. Mornings followed the same pattern. Coffee, emails, a quick kiss goodbye. Nothing dramatic, nothing suspicious. The morning I found out wasn't dramatic either. I was walking past the dining table, already late for work, thinking about whether I'd forgotten my badge again. Her laptop was open, screen still on. That wasn't unusual. She was careless with it sometimes. Trusted the house. Trusted me. What caught my attention wasn't the laptop. It was the message preview glowing near the bottom of the screen. Not the words at first. The tone. There's a familiarity you can feel even before you understand it. A rhythm that doesn't belong to coworkers or casual friends. I stopped walking. Read it once. Then again. By the time I scrolled, my body had gone still. This wasn't flirting. It wasn't curiosity. It was ongoing. They talked about each other the way people do when they've already crossed every line and stopped pretending otherwise. Plans were made casually. Excuses referenced earlier lies I remembered believing without question. I didn't slam the laptop shut. I didn't feel dizzy or panicked. What I felt was clarity. I closed it carefully, exactly the way I'd found it, and went to work like nothing had happened. That afternoon, instead of going home, I sat in my car and called a divorce attorney I'd never spoken to before. I didn't tell him I was hurt. I told him I needed information. Assets. Timelines. What mattered and what didn't. He listened quietly, then said something simple. Don't confront her yet. I didn't ask why. I already knew. Confrontation gives people room to improvise. Time to reshape the story while you're still emotional enough to doubt yourself. I didn't want that, so I waited. Over the next couple of weeks, I watched more than I questioned. Late meetings that didn't make sense. Calls taken outside. A sudden concern with privacy she'd never had before. I documented everything. Screenshots, dates, calendar invites, hotel confirmations buried under work-related folders. I wasn't looking for proof anymore. I was building a timeline. The man's name appeared often. Too often. When I finally searched it properly, the rest fell into place quickly. Social media is careless. People document their lives without realizing how much they're revealing. He was married. His wife's profile took less than a minute to find. Photos of vacations, smiling captions, anniversary posts that made my chest tighten, not with jealousy, but recognition. I stared at her page for a long time before reaching out. Telling someone like that isn't easy. You don't know how they'll react. Denial, anger, silence. You also don't know what kind of damage you're about to cause. But some truths don't belong to one person alone. I sent a short message. Calm, direct, no accusations. Her reply came faster than I expected. She already suspected. We talked that night. Then again the next day. Compared notes. Dates lined up with an accuracy that left no room for interpretation. Stories matched too well. Excuses repeated word for word. By the end of the second call, there was no confusion left, only decisions. Neither of us wanted a dramatic explosion behind closed doors. We didn't want shouting matches that could be reframed later. We wanted something clean, something undeniable. That's how the idea formed. Public, controlled, documented. If they were going to lie, they'd have to do it where witnesses could see their faces. For the next week, I kept playing my role. Breakfast conversations, casual plans, normalcy so convincing that even I almost forgot what was coming. That was the strangest part, how easy it was for her to pretend nothing was wrong. If stories like this feel uncomfortably real, you might want to stay with me. Subscribing helps, but only if you want to hear what happens when pretending finally stops. By the time I sat down across from Claire at that restaurant, everything was already decided. The paperwork, the boundaries, the outcome. All that was left was to let the truth arrive on its own. The waiter had just cleared our plates when I noticed the shift in the room. It wasn't dramatic. No doors slamming open. No raised voices. Just a subtle change in the air, like the temperature dropped a degree and only one person noticed. I saw her before she saw me. She stood just inside the entrance, scanning the tables too quickly, eyes sharp and restless. She wasn't dressed for a casual dinner. Her hair was done, makeup perfect. She looked like someone who had come prepared to make a point. My wife. She spotted me a second later. I watched the recognition hit her face. Confusion first, then irritation, then something sharper. Her eyes flicked to the woman sitting across from me. Claire met her gaze calmly, lifting her wine glass slightly, unbothered. I didn't wave. I didn't stand. I didn't react at all. That seemed to irritate her more than anything else. She marched over, heels clicking against the floor, drawing the kind of attention people pretend not to notice while absolutely noticing. "What is this?" she demanded, stopping at the edge of the table. Her voice wasn't loud yet, but it carried. Nearby conversation slowed. A couple at the next table glanced over, then looked away too late. I leaned back in my chair slightly, giving her space. "You're early." Her eyes narrowed. "Don't do that." "Who is she?" She pointed at Claire, like she was pointing out a problem to be removed. "I'm Claire. Claire said evenly. Nice to finally meet you. That threw her off. My wife turned back to me. Are you serious right now? You couldn't even wait until I got here to start embarrassing me. I took my time before answering. I wanted the moment to stretch. Wanted her to feel it. You accused me of cheating, I said calmly. You should probably explain that part first. Her mouth opened, then closed. She scoffed, shaking her head. Don't act innocent. I know exactly what this looks like. People were watching now. Not openly, but enough. The waiter paused a few steps away, pretending to adjust something on a nearby table. You followed me, I said. You rushed here because someone told you I was having dinner with another woman. So, she snapped. How do you think that feels? I nodded slowly. Uncomfortable. She leaned closer, lowering her voice, but her anger was slipping through the cracks. You think this is funny? Bringing some random woman out just to get back at me? Claire set her glass down gently. I'm not random, she said. My wife ignored her. Say something, she demanded, eyes locked on mine. Are you trying to hurt me? That was when I decided it was time. I sat up, rested my forearms on the table, and spoke clearly, loud enough to be heard, but not loud enough to sound emotional. You've been sleeping with her husband. The words landed heavier than I expected. My wife froze. What? She laughed, but it came out wrong. Too sharp. Too fast. That's insane. I turned slightly toward Claire. Do you want to tell her? Or should I? Claire reached into her purse and placed her phone on the table, screen facing up. She slid it forward without a word. My wife's eyes flicked down, then back up, then down again. Her face drained of color. That's not. She started, then stopped. Why would you have that? Because I'm married to him, Claire said. Or I was. The silence that followed felt thick, like the room itself was holding its breath. My wife straightened, looking around as if she'd suddenly realized how many people were nearby. This is ridiculous, she said, voice louder now. You're setting me up. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. You forgot to close your laptop, I said. That was weeks ago. Her eyes snapped back to mine. We compared notes. I continued. Messages. Dates. Hotels. Stories you both thought were clever. She shook her head slowly, like she was trying to physically dislodge the reality settling in. You went through my things. I documented the truth, I said. There's a difference. A couple at the next table had stopped pretending not to listen. Someone across the room openly stared. My wife's voice cracked. You could have talked to me privately and given you a chance to rewrite it? I asked. No. She turned to Claire suddenly. You don't know the whole story. Claire met her gaze without blinking. I know enough. My wife looked back at me, eyes wet now. You're doing this to humiliate me. I nodded once. You did that yourself. She reached for my arm. I moved it out of reach. I'm done, I said. I've already filed. You'll be hearing from my attorney. That was when the panic finally showed. You can't just decide that, she whispered. We can fix this. I stood, slowly, deliberately. I already decided. Weeks ago. She looked around the room again, realizing too late how public this had become. How many witnesses there were. How little control she had left. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she said. I picked up my jacket. Neither did I. But here we are. I turned to Claire. Ready? She nodded, standing beside me. Behind us, my wife said my name. Once. Then again, louder. I didn't turn around. The door closed behind us with a soft chime. Outside, the night air felt cooler, cleaner, like stepping out of a room that had been slowly filling with smoke. Neither of us spoke until we reached the end of the block. Claire exhaled first. Well, she said quietly, that part's done. I nodded. Yeah, now comes the easy part. For the first time in weeks, I believed it. The next few days passed in a strange blur, like time had lost its normal shape. After the restaurant, I didn't go home. I drove around for nearly an hour with no destination, windows cracked open, letting the cool air settle the static in my head. I wasn't replaying the confrontation anymore. That part was done. Finished. What lingered was the quiet realization that something permanent had shifted, and there was no going back to pretending. When I finally returned to the apartment, the lights were off. Her car wasn't there. I slept better than I had in weeks. The next morning, my phone was full of messages. Missed calls, voicemails, long texts that shifted tone every few lines. Anger, confusion, apology, bargaining. I didn't open any of them. I forwarded everything to my lawyer and blocked her number. Silence followed. That silence didn't feel empty. It felt earned. A few days later, Claire called. We hadn't spoken since that night, other than a short text confirming we'd both made it home safely. He told me everything, she said without preamble. I leaned back in my chair. Everything. As much as he could while still blaming everyone else, she replied. Denied some things, minimized others, then broke down when he realized I wasn't backing down. I could picture it easily. The confidence fading, the story collapsing once it stopped being private. He's staying at a hotel, she continued. At least for now. I nodded, even though she couldn't see it. I'm sorry. Don't be, she said. I needed the truth more than I needed comfort. Over the next few weeks, things moved faster than I expected. The paperwork was straightforward, just as my lawyer had predicted. No shared property, no kids, clean lines. Every document felt less like a loss and more like closure. My wife tried reaching out through mutual friends, then through email, then through her sister. Each attempt came with a different version of the same message, regret mixed with justification. She didn't mean for it to happen. She was confused. She didn't think it would go that far. I didn't respond. One afternoon, I ran into her sister at a grocery store. She looked uncomfortable, like she'd rehearsed what to say but hadn't decided whether to say it. She's not doing well, she said finally. I believed her, but I didn't feel responsible. I hope she figures things out, I replied. That's it, her sister asked. That's it. Walking away felt easier than I'd expected. Not because I didn't care, but because caring didn't mean staying. Claire and I met once more, weeks later, for coffee. Not to plan anything, not to rehash the past, just to check in. She looked lighter, tired, but steadier. I didn't realize how much energy I was spending doubting myself, she said. It's strange how obvious things feel once you stop being lied to. I smiled. Clarity does that. We didn't promise to stay in touch. We didn't need to. What we shared had already served its purpose. As the months passed, my life settled into something quieter and more deliberate. I rearranged the apartment, sold things that held memories I didn't need anymore, started running in the mornings, cooked meals for one without resenting it. People asked if I was angry, if I wanted closure, if I needed to confront her one last time. I didn't. Closure isn't something someone else gives you. It's something you decide to stop asking for. One evening, months later, I found an old photo of us tucked into a drawer I hadn't opened in a while. I studied it longer than I expected, then slid it back and closed the drawer. I wasn't sad. I was done, and that was enough. Time has a way of revealing things you were too close to see before. As my life settled into a quieter rhythm, memories started resurfacing, not the dramatic ones, but the small, easily dismissed moments that finally made sense. The late dinners she brushed off, the way she'd sometimes flinch when I picked up her phone to check the time, the sudden interest in privacy that I'd mistaken for stress. None of it felt obvious back then. It never does when you're living inside it. The divorce paperwork moved forward without resistance. She signed everything her lawyer advised her to sign. No drawn-out battles. No last-minute demands. I think part of her new fighting would only expose more than she wanted anyone to see. We didn't speak. Not once. Friends tried to mediate. Suggested coffee. Closure conversations. Final explanations. I declined every time. I wasn't angry. I just didn't have anything left to say. One afternoon, my lawyer called to confirm a final date. Once the judge signs, he said, this is officially over. I thanked him and hung up, then sat there longer than necessary, phone resting in my hand. Officially over. The phrase sounded heavier than it felt. A few days later, I heard through someone else that she'd moved into a smaller apartment across town. New job, new routine. Same city, different orbit. Our lives had separated cleanly, like two lines finally diverging after running parallel for too long. Claire reached out once more, weeks after everything had been finalized. A short message. Simple. Hope you're doing well. I replied with the same. That was it. I didn't need to know how she was doing beyond that. I didn't need updates. What mattered was that we'd both walked away without letting the situation turn us into people we didn't recognize. There's a strange freedom that comes from choosing restraint instead of reaction, from letting consequences speak louder than accusations. I learned that calm isn't weakness, it's control. Life slowly filled itself with new habits. Morning runs turned into longer routes. Cooking for one became less about survival and more about enjoyment. I reconnected with friends I'd unintentionally drifted from. People who didn't ask questions unless I invited them to. And when I did talk about it, I noticed something surprising. I didn't sound bitter. I sounded resolved. One night, while sitting on my balcony, watching the city lights blink on as the sky darkened, I thought about how close I'd come to handling everything differently. How easy it would have been to explode, to demand answers, to let anger lead. I'm glad I didn't. Not because she deserved grace, but because I deserved peace. Sometimes, moving on isn't about starting something new. It's about stopping something that no longer fits. I didn't lose my marriage that year. I regained my self-respect. And that, more than anything else, changed everything. The final confirmation came on an ordinary Tuesday. No courtroom drama, no speeches, just a signed document uploaded to a portal and an automated email confirming what had already been true for months. I read it once, closed my laptop, and sat there longer than necessary, listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. That was it. I expected to feel something sharper, relief, maybe, or sadness, but what I felt instead was steady, neutral in the best possible way. Like I'd set down a weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying for years. People assume the end is the hardest part. It isn't. The hardest part is the stretch in between, when you know the truth but still have to live beside the lie. Once that's gone, everything else feels manageable. I didn't celebrate. I didn't call anyone. I went for a long walk instead. No headphones, no destination. Just letting the city move around me while my thoughts finally slowed to a pace I could keep up with. In the weeks that followed, I noticed how much space had opened up in my life. Not just physical space, but mental space. I stopped replaying conversations, stopped second-guessing reactions, stopped wondering whether I was being unreasonable for feeling the way I felt. There was nothing left to debate. I heard bits and pieces about her through mutual acquaintances, never directly, always filtered through concern or curiosity. She tried to explain herself to people who didn't ask, tried to reframe the story in ways that softened her role. Some believed her, some didn't. It didn't matter. What surprised me was how quickly her absence became normal. Not painless, but familiar, like a room after furniture has been moved out. At first it echoes. Then, slowly, it becomes usable again. I rearranged things, changed routines, took down photos I hadn't realized I was still avoiding. I wasn't erasing my past. I was just deciding where it belonged. There were moments, quiet ones, when I thought about reaching out. Not to reconcile, but to close the loop. To ask questions that had lingered. To hear explanations she'd never been able to give without deflecting. Every time that thought surfaced, another followed immediately after. What would that actually give me? The answer was always the same. Nothing. Clarity doesn't come from the person who broke your trust. It comes from accepting that they already showed you everything you needed to know. One evening, months later, I ran into someone we both knew at a bookstore. He hesitated when he saw me, like he wasn't sure which version of the story I belonged to. "You doing okay?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, and realized I meant it. He nodded, relieved. "That's good." We talked about other things after that. Work, travel, books. The conversation moved easily, without the weight of what he didn't ask, and I didn't offer. Walking home, I thought about how far I'd come from that first moment of discovery. How the initial shock had given way to planning, then action, then distance, then calm. Not because I rushed the process, but because I respected it. I learned something through all of this that I don't think I would have learned any other way. You don't need to win in the loudest way for it to count. You don't need to destroy someone to reclaim yourself. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to participate any longer. Refuse to argue. Refuse to explain. Refuse to carry what isn't yours. I didn't get closure from her. I didn't need it. I got it from choosing myself when it mattered, and then continuing to choose myself every day after that. That choice doesn't announce itself. It doesn't demand recognition. It just quietly changes the direction of your life. And once it does, you don't look back. Not because you're bitter, but because you finally understand where you're going. The quiet that followed wasn't empty. It was earned. In the months after everything ended, I started to notice how much of my life I'd been living on autopilot before. Decisions I used to second-guess came easily now. Mornings felt lighter. Even mundane things, grocery shopping, cleaning, walking home after work, felt different, like I was finally present instead of just moving through routines I'd built around someone else. I stopped explaining myself. That might have been the biggest change. When people asked what happened, I didn't give speeches. I didn't defend my choices or justify why I walked away the way I did. I simply said it didn't work out, and that was enough. The people who mattered didn't push. The ones who did weren't people I needed close anymore. There's a strange clarity that comes when you realize how much noise you've been tolerating. Arguments that go nowhere. Conversations that loop. Apologies that aren't followed by change. Once that noise is gone, you don't rush to fill the silence. You protect it. I thought, for a while, that moving on meant replacing what I'd lost. Another relationship. Another version of the same life, just with a different face. But that urge faded quickly. What I wanted wasn't replacement. It was alignment. So I took my time. I traveled alone for the first time in years. Nothing extravagant, just a few days away, waking up without an agenda, eating when I felt like it, walking until I was tired. I realized how rarely I'd done anything purely for myself before. Not out of sacrifice, but out of habit. At night, I slept deeply. No racing thoughts. No replays of conversations. No wondering where someone was or who they were with. Trust, I learned, isn't just about another person. It's about trusting yourself to walk away when something feels wrong. Every now and then, memories surfaced unexpectedly. A song, a place, a phrase someone used in passing. They didn't hurt the way I thought they would. They felt distant, like remembering a previous version of yourself that you no longer lived inside. That's when I knew I was truly past it. I never unblocked her. Not out of spite, just consistency. Boundaries don't work if you keep checking whether they still matter. I didn't need one last conversation. I didn't need apologies that arrived too late to change anything. Some endings don't need closure. They need acceptance. I also noticed something else. Once I stopped carrying the weight of someone else's deception, I had more patience, more awareness, less tolerance for excuses. I listened differently. I trusted patterns instead of promises. And that changed the kind of people I let into my life. The story didn't end with revenge. It didn't end with triumph. It ended with peace. The kind that doesn't announce itself. The kind you only recognize when you look back and realize how far you've come without even trying to prove anything. If there's one thing this experience taught me, it's this: self-respect is quiet. It doesn't need an audience. It doesn't need validation. It just needs one decision, followed by another, and another, until one day you realize your life finally feels like your own again. And if you stayed with this story until the end, I appreciate you. Stories like this aren't about drama. They're about moments where people choose themselves when it matters most. If you want to hear more real, grounded stories like this, consider subscribing. Not because you have to, only if these kinds of stories speak to you. Either way, take this with you. You don't need to explode to move on. You don't need closure to heal. Sometimes, walking away calmly is the strongest move you'll ever make.